Hello, let's solve max difference you can get from changing an integer. So you have one integer and you can do an operation on it. Pick any digit and you can change it into any other digit. And from that integer you create two integers, one big integer, one small integer, and you want the difference to be as big as possible. Let's look at the examples. For example, this one, well, the first number you could change 555 into 999, and the second one you could change 555 into 111, right? And 999 minus 111 is 888. And the reason why for the second number you can't choose y equals 0 is because neither a or b may have any leading zeros and must not be 0. So that's why for this example the second number is 111 and we can't do anything better, right? Another example is if you just have 9, then very similar, you'll end up being 9 minus 1, right? You can't make it bigger than 9, so you just leave it at 9. And for the second one you can't make it 0 because that's forbidden, and the best you can do is 1. And so before looking at the solution, let's maybe look at another example, two other examples. So the first one will be 151. And if you want the difference to be as big as possible, you want the first number to be as big as possible and the second number to be as small as possible. For the first number to be as big as possible, we'll scan through the number from the left to the right and we'll try to change the first digit we see that is not a 9, and we'll try and put it to a 9, right? If it's already a 9, we don't change it, but if it's not a 9, then we change it to 9, and that's the biggest we can have, because we're looking from left to right, and when you compare two numbers, the leftmost digits are more important. So here, to get a big number, we can get 959. To get a small number here, we do the same. We scan from left to right, and we try and get any digit to 0 or 1 as soon as possible. We just have to keep in mind that we can't have any leading zeros. So for example here, 151, I cannot change this one into a 0, and I don't want to make it bigger, so I'll just leave it as such. And this 5, I can make it 0, so I'll transform it into 0, and that'll be 101, and that'll be the answer. If we look at the second example, it's very similar. We scan from left to right, 5 becomes 9, and because the first number is not a 1, then we can transform the 5 into a 1 to have the smallest number. So instead of transforming the second digit here, we're transforming the first digit. And this is sort of a greedy approach that will allow us to solve the problem. And one good thing to notice is that for the first example, when I wanted to create the smallest number, I transformed the 5 into 0, but in the second example, I transformed the 5 into 1. This is because in the second example, I was transforming a digit that if I was to transform into a 0, I would have a number with leading zeros, and that's forbidden. So the first thing we'll do is to transform num, the variable num, from integer to a list of digits, because we want to iterate through the digits, and it's just easier if everything is stored in a list. So for example, if num equals 151, I want to have a list with 1, 5, and 1. So there's two ways we can do this. We can transform num to a string and then iterate through the characters of the string and transform them back to integers, or we can just do use basic arithmetic. So we'll do the second way, the arithmetic way. So I'll call this variable num digits, and while num is bigger than 0, it means there's still digits to process. I'll just do num digits dot append num modulus 10, and then I'll divide num by 10. Right? So what will happen for 151? Well, first step I add 1, then I divide by 10, so it becomes 15. That's step 1. Then I add 5, I divide by 10, and then I add 1, I divide by 10, and now num is equal to 0, so I exit the loop. But because I'm adding numbers from right to left, I have to reverse my list after going through this loop. Admittedly not the best example. Or just reverse. And then I'll create a copy of this list just so that I can do one loop to transform this list as the biggest integer I can, and another loop to transform that list into the smallest integer I can get. But because I want to do these independently, I'll just want to copy the list. So num digits copy equals num digits.copy. So that will be storing the minimum value I can get. Num digits will be storing the maximum value. And now that I have those list of digits, I can iterate on them. So let's do max first, and then we'll do min, and then we'll basically return max minus min. But we'll have to transform back from list to integers. But again, that's basic arithmetic. So we'll iterate from left to right, as we said, because the leftmost digits are more important than the rightmost digits. So for I in range length of num digits. And we said that we want to transform the digit to none, unless it's already 9. If it's already 9, we don't want to change it because maybe there's other things we could change. For example, if I have the digit 98, then I could change this 9 into a 9. Would be stupid because I don't gain anything, but I could transform this 8 into a 9, and which would be good because I would end up with a bigger number. So if num digits I different than 9, then I found my candidate and I can just transform everything. So digit to transform int initially will be -1, and here we'll set it to num digits I, and then we can break because we found it. And then we just have to iterate again through the list and do something like num digits I equals 9, and this only if num digits I equals digit to transform. So that we transform all the digits that are equal to our candidates, because this is a transformation we're allowed to do. And so that will be it for the max operation. For the min operation, it will be very similar, but we have to be very careful because we have to deal with this leading 0 problem. So again, we'll store digit to transform, which will be initially -1. We will traverse the array, but this time we're working on num digits copy everywhere. As we said, num digits will be for the max and num digits copy will be for the min. And here we want to find any digit that's either not a 1 or a 0. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, we're happy with it because we can transform them. So if num digits copy I bigger than 1, we're happy. But also we can transform a 1 into a 0 if we're not having a number with leading zeros as a result. And it turns out this can never happen, right? So let's make some examples to better understand this. If my number is 151, then if I transform this 1 into a 0, then I have a number with leading zeros that's forbidden, so I'll transform this 5. Now what if I have 111? Then I cannot transform this one, I cannot transform this one, I cannot transform this one, I cannot transform anything. what if I have 9, 1? It is true that I could transform this 1 into a 0 because I wouldn't have any leading zeros. But I could also just transform this 9 into a 1, and that would just be better. So it just turns out that I just have to find the first number that is not a 1 and not a 0. Right, for example, in this case, 1, 0, 9, the first number that's not a 1, not a 0 is 9, and the smallest number I can get with the transformations the problem statement is allowing us is 100. Hopefully those examples are convincing enough. So I'll have digit to transform equals num digits copy I, and I can break. But now, again, new challenge compared to the earlier transformation. Earlier I would just have to transform everything into 9s. Here, as you remember, I can either transform this 5 into a 0 or this 5 into a 1. And the reason why I didn't transform this 5 into a 0 was because otherwise I would have a number with leading zeros. So I also have to check if I equals 0, then I'll just set a variable to transform to 1 equal true. Otherwise, transform to 1 will be false. Right? If it's in the beginning, I have to transform to 1. Otherwise, I don't have to. And I can just put 0. And then it's exactly the same here. I just have to be careful. I'm operating on num digits copy. And so if the num digits copy I is equal to digit to transform, then I will put 1 if transform to 1, else 0. And now I want to return this num digits minus num digits copy, right? And again, there's two ways of doing this. Either I can just use strings, or I can just use basic arithmetic. So we used basic arithmetic earlier, so let's do it the string way here, just to change things up. So big number would be just the integer version of the string version, and I guess I have to join all the characters, so that would actually this dot join num digits. They have to all be characters, like something like this. So this operation will transform from a list of integers to a list of strings, and this operation will transform the list of strings from one string and then transform it to an integer. Right? So that was just to show you the other way. Honestly, I prefer this way, but now you know both ways. And for small numbers, the same. Except I'm operating on num digits copy, and then I can just return big number minus small number. So let's see if I made any typo, if I had any typo. All the tests pass, so we should be good to go.